are going to cover the function. By the end of the function, you guys should be able to identify the type of function. You should be able to use the function, all type of the function that we are dealing with, right? First of all, what is a function? So, like we all know, a function is just a group of codes that perform a specific task. This is all we know, right? Because so far we have been dealing with what a function called a main function. That's the only function that we have been dealing with. So right now, it doesn't mean your program always going to have only one function called a main function, right? Like in this case, now we're introducing the function. You may have cases whereby you're having 3 functions or 4 functions. And then in programming, we have 2 types of function. We have what we call a library function and what we call a user-defined function as well, right? Normally, what we call a library function are type of the function that's already built inside of your compiler, right? This is what we call a library function, because even a iOS streams is what we call also a library function, right? Is what we call a library function. We have a C math library function and so on. There are so many of them. And then some of you, I think you went through it and then you try to deal with it so far. Or you guys still dealing with, you dealt only with the iOS stream, so on. So, and then the second type of function, like I say, we have what we call a user-defined function. This is a function whereby you as a programmer, this is what you as a programmer you are setting up, right? This is what we call, this is an example of the user function. Like in my example here, we're having, this is our main function. This is a function that you create. As an example, this is the title of your function, and those are the operations that you're supposed to go inside, right? Are we okay? And then this is our main function, right? So, and then you need to know why are we creating a function? Because this is the main purpose of everything. If you don't know why are you creating a function, so what is the purpose of it? Because I know we were busy all the time coding everything in the main function. And then the more, when you'll be dealing with complex system or complex coding, you are not going to be able to, your code will look messy. It's not going to be easy for you to deal with so many things in the same place, right? So that's why the idea of creating, the purpose of creating a function is just to make your programming easy. Your codes to be not be complex, like to simplify it, if I may say the simplest way. So it's also going to help you to write the code only once. Remember, I told you since the beginning, our main problem in programming, you should always avoid to repeat yourself, right? You should always, because repeating yourself, like it's taking you also time, you are taking also a computer time when you are compiling your program as well, right? And then, the other thing you guys should know, how to name your function as well. Because there are procedures, there are convention naming of the function. Like we have been dealing with, because I know most of the time we just name it, give it a name. Your function needs to have a meaning name that clearly identifies it, right? You should not just name it any name and then it's doing something else. Not what it was supposed normally to do. Like in this case, I have an example where it's not, whereby a function print average, right? Like print average. Normally it's an example whereby in that, if I name my function print average, that means inside of that function, I should have an operation that is really dealing with average, right? It's not like I just really print just average. If I just write it average, that means it's just dealing with calculation or something dealing with, I'm not printing anything there. So, is it clear? So those are the kind of principles that you guys should know also when you are naming your function. And then we are having also, we can have also cases whereby your function can have return type, return value, so on. And then I think last week some of you asked me a question where I tried to cover it. I tried to tell you that it depends how you define your function, right? Because remember your function needs to be defined as well. Like, it needs to be defined whereby you need to put your data type and then put your function name as well. Is it okay? So the way you define your function, this is what is going to determine if you really need a return type or not. That is more important. Is it sharp? And then this is the main thing. After you creating a function, you're still going to need to call it up from your main function in order for you to use it. Right? For you to call a function, that means you need to go to your main and then call that function that you create. This is kind of an example. In this example, I have my main function that is here, and then this is the function that I create. Right? This is the function that I create. Here inside, this is a simple calculation that I'm going to do in this kind of exercise. In this case, when I say add, in my function add, what I'm busy doing here is just adding those two values and send it back. In this case, because the way I define my function, I need to have a return value, right? So this is what is going to happen. I have my two number that is defined here, right? And then from here, the user enters the two numbers, right? After the user enters the two numbers, I'm going now to send those two numbers to my function that's defined here, right? So this function, what is it going to do? It's going to add those two values and then send it back, right? Because I'm returning the value here, right? Send it back and then I'm going to publish the answer, right? Is it sharp? Another thing you guys should know, this is what we call a parameters, right? You guys know. The reason why I'm passing those two, because my function as well is defined with two parameters. If I miss one of them, that means it's going to give me an error. Is it sharp? Can I pass? Can you? This one normally is not really necessary. It's just kind of declaring variable. I try to declare it and then do the operation as well. Because remember, so on when we'll be moving, we'll be dealing with, I think I told you guys where we have a public declaration and which one is another one? Is it a private? A global end. So we cover it when we reach there. Because if I could have do a global declaration, everything will be on top. Right? That means I don't need even this one. If I put it on top, that means I can use it wherever I want to use it, those same values. I don't have to repeat, to put it again inside here. That means if I declare my value inside of this function, I can only use it inside here. right?
If you point something out, put it up on the screen, because the camera isn't picking up on that screen.
Okay.
So point out to the big one now.
I should point on the big one. Yes, this is kind of what I was talking to you as well, right? This is what I tried to explain to you. This is my main function. This is the function that I created, right? And then here inside, I call the same function to do a calculation for me and then return the value for me and print it out. This is what happens normally in passing arguments in the function. This one here. This one happened in the cases whereby, remember your compiler read from the top to the bottom, right? It happened, the reason why we declare this function here is because to just let the compiler know, because when your compiler is reading, if you didn't declare this guy, when it's going to reach this line here, it's going to give you an error, because you are talking about the 8, but you didn't see it yet, right? You're talking about the 8, but you didn't see it yet. It's going just to reach that level after the main function. So the reason, in order for us to avoid that, that's why we declare that function here, right? The other way would be like taking this declare function to put it on top of the main. Put it before where you are calling it. Because is not always whereby you are going to call a function from the main. Because there are some kind of the function whereby this function can have also its own sub-function whereby himself, only him is the one calling that function. Right? Like I said, a return type. Right? Return type, as I said to you, like in this case, it's just what are you returning depending on the function that you're creating. Right? If you return a double, because in this case, when I say return 8, and my function is int, that means any value that I'm returning here is supposed to be an integer values. I cannot expect a double value in this function, right? Is it sharp? Like I say, we have some type of function, like user-defined function. Normally, we categorize them in 4 types. The function that return no values, a function with no arguments and return values, and then a function with arguments with no return values, and then a function with arguments and a return values. So just depend to the exercise that you are going to do with them. But most of them, if it's the same exercise, it depends how you're going to play around with your code as well. Sometimes you may just end up having the same answer, right? So, like I have some few examples here. This example, in this example, I'm dealing with no argument and pass. There's no argument that I'm passing from my function that I create, and there's no return value as well, right? It's kind of the same example. I did it like in those 4 types that we are dealing with. And then in the end, I'm still going to have the same answer regarding to my function, what I created, right? Just to show you that you can just play around with it. It depends on you. Like in this case, this is the function that I create. It's coming here, right? When I arrive my main function, I call this function that is here. In this function, what is happening? I have a value enter a positive integer enter to check. And then I load this value as well. And then this is what is happening inside, right? In the end, this is what I'm printing out, right? That's me, I'm not returning any values in this case, right? And then in the second case,
Sorry,
yeah,
when you say no arguments, they are like parameters.
yeah. Normally, we also call it argument as well. Because if you check this function here, I have nothing here. That's why I say to you to always be careful with what you are putting here. Which data type, how you define your function. Because we're having some of them, you need always to have a return type. Another one, you cannot have a return type. Like a void, normally, you don't need a return type. There's no return type for that. And then we're having another one where we're dealing with a Boolean data type, where you either have 1 or 0, or a true or false. So those are the things you guys should know it by now, I think so. This is my second example, whereby you'll be dealing with no argument passed, but there's a return value. Right? This is how I define my function. I don't have any argument here. I'm not passing anything, right? But I have a value. I have to return something to my main function in order for him to carry on with the job that he's supposed to do, right? If you check the code, from here, I'm requesting my function to come out, and then cout prints a positive integer to check, right? Cin, I'm going to load this value, right? And then send it back, right? From that number, this is where I'm going to carry on to do what is happening here, right? Is it sharp? And the third one, as I said to you, arguments pass but no return values, right? This is my argument. For me to pass the value to this function, that means I need to have an argument inside, right? This is what happened. Enter a positive integer to check, right? The user enters the value, I load the value to num, right? And then I pass these parameters here to my function, right? Because here I'm calling the function, right? Do you guys understand what is happening, right? You don't. Okay, this is what is happening. This is my variable, right? Cout, enter positive integer to check. Here I'm asking a user to enter the value, right? And I load the user value to this variable, right? And then what am I going to do next? Argument num is passed to the function prime. That means I'm taking this value that the user entered to my function, this function here, right? Because in this function I have a parameter that is here, and then I only have one parameters in this function. You need to be careful. Therefore, if you are dealing with a function that has 4 parameters, you need to pass also 4 parameters, right? Like in this case, I'm only dealing with 1 parameters, right? So here I'm calling the function, and then I'm sending also the parameters, right? I'm going to reach this level. When I send the value, this is going now to carry on with the job, right? If I miss to send a value, that means this function is not going to run. It's going to give me an error, right?
Let's say we put the function on top. We're going to pass the new value to the prime.
If you put this one on top, it's still gonna do, because the computer going to know. The reason why the computer going to know that you are calling him, this function, to go back to him because of this, right? Because when you are calling a function, it doesn't matter where is that function. Is it on top or down, right? It only matters in the cases whereby you need to define it for the computer to know when it's going from top to down, to know where is that function it lays, for him to have an idea where is it. Because when you be calling it, you should know where should I find it, right? This is the fourth one, argument pass, and we have a return value, right? In this case, this is my argument that I need to pass. The user enters the value, I load it here, and I pass this value to my function, and then my function is going to do the task that I want it to do, and then return a 0 value, right? Is it okay? And then from there, my main function is going to proceed to reach the end. So it's sharp. Like I said to you, which method is better between the four of them? All of them are good, depending to how you want to play around with your codes, right? Because I cannot say this one is good, this one is bad, but as long, because you are the programmer, you are the one who has objective with your code as well. Because there are some codes whereby you may just need the one that return no values. There are some cases whereby you're just going to need also the one you pass parameters and return values as well. This is one of the biggest rules as well that you guys should know. Why are we saying overloading function? It is the cases where you are having so many functions with the same name. Although you change the data type, but still the same name. Although you change the parameter inside, but still the same name. Your compiler is going to refuse sometimes. It's going to complain. Because remember, computer also knows about name. You are going to confuse your compiler as well. Because when you are calling it inside of the function where you want to call this function, user function that you created, you are not going to use this, right? You're just going to use this name here, right? And then that will be a biggest problem as well. It's going to confuse the computer sometimes, like whereby which same function, like in this case, which same function do you want? So you guys should be very careful with that as well. And that is the end of our courses.